Welcome to the Shirati Show. I'm Claude Shirati. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a little while. We were unable to go on air due to some other urgent matters that we need to attend to, but we're back. And tonight I have a special guest with me who is joining us from Brisbane, Queensland, and his name is Nick Takavadi. Nick, how are you today?
I'm good, Clyde. How are you doing?
Good, good. How's everything in Queensland?
Oh, it's a bit cool today. It's
Yeah.
usually hot up here, but all good.
All right. Even in Melbourne, it's a bit cool. In fact, it was drizzling a little bit. So I know you guys always have the sun, and so we can't talk too much about that because Melbourne weather it's a different thing. Nick, thanks for making the time to speak to us today. I would like first to start by asking you to introduce yourself so that people know exactly who you are and what you do.
All right. Nick Takavadi, living in Brisbane here, also called Mianjin with my family. And I was born and bred in Zimbabwe, which is where my values, my African Wunu, Ubuntu, and communal living and communal being was cemented. I currently work through an organization called Pecolab, where we are a lab creating practices for collaboration and working with teams, organizations to help them work better together.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So I know you are a collaboration facilitator. Tell us a little bit about that. What exactly do you do, and how do you facilitate things in that perspective?
Um, I like to use the word host. I
Host.
host people rather than facilitate, because facilitate, language is powerful. The words you use mean different things. Facilitate is like doing things to others. Well, what we do and what I do with my colleagues is we create spaces for good things to happen. And those spaces are through both physical, both through practices and trainings that come with that, to bring in that collaboration. I am a practitioner of what is called the art of hosting, which is an international practice which focuses on hosting conversations that matter. And it works around a number of theories, practices, and principles. And I can share some of those as we go.
Okay, well, talking about that, we recently organized the Brisbane Afropreneur Summit, where we had your assistant in hosting, facilitating, even though perhaps you may not use that word, but you hosted what we call the Afropreneur Cafe. And that was a workshop where we wanted people to communicate about a number of things, explore ideas together, and share insights. And it was really, really good. Everybody really liked what you did. Can you tell our audiences a little bit about that whole framework?
All right. Personally, this is more like a personal thing. Whenever I go to conferences, the formats and the format of meeting that is usually there is you have speakers, then you have Q&A at the end. And for me, that does not quite represent the full balance of power. If you have a room full of experts, the assumption really is that all individuals are experts. And I really like to create opportunities where all voices are heard, and such that we become a collective brain. Coming from an African culture, it's a very deep contrast to the Western culture where there's rugged individualism, and bringing this together. So what we did in that, then, thanks for that opportunity, Clyde, and thanks for your courage to just say, oh, I like the idea, go on, do what you can do. and I teamed up with Jane Brassington. We didn't have much time to prepare, but because I'm bringing this not from scratch, it's borrowed from the art of hosting practice, from a practice called World Cafe. So the World Cafe is what we then, to suit this occasion of collaborating to elevate, which was the theme of the conference. We then had conversations and questions around that. People were sitting in small tables, just like you'd sit in a cafe. They were given questions to discuss, and then people moved around the table with different questions. So there was a cross-pollination of the ideas. And out of that, we harvested. I like, coming from Africa, agriculture is a big thing. So we also I like to use the metaphor of harvesting. Like, you plant food, so you don't have meetings to just have excellent meetings. You have meetings so you can harvest something. So I would like, actually, those who were there, we actually have a harvest from that workshop, and the participants will soon be getting the ideas from there, with a challenge question of, with all this, what do we do next? So that the Afropreneurs Summits are action-based as much as they are also about conversation. And thanks
Now,
so
do you
much.
think that, sure, do you think that if that participation is done in the best possible way, and then it encourages collaboration in the future, or does it, are there any other factors that could interfere in how people, after something like a conference or a meeting, decide then to extend the collaboration beyond that initial setting?
The beauty of this, Clyde, is that here in Brisbane, we were not starting from scratch. We were building up on the other summits that you've been having, and I was really drawn to this. I remember when I first got in touch with you via LinkedIn. I think you had
Mm-hmm.
posted something about the challenges that we as Africans, both in the diaspora and in Africa, um, we have this challenge of not patronizing each other's businesses and things like that. And that came up in the discussions there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens now is, firstly, through that practice, people got to be able to be talking about things. And that in itself is like planting a seed for people to be talking some more and talking in a different way. So in there, we had people who are experts in the many different areas. We had the lawyers, we had doctors, but when we were in this workshop, there was no ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was contributing. And we feel that the motivation from that, people will be able to pick up something that they can run with. And TJ and Geraldine, who volunteered to take the harvest and capture it into the document, did a great job to sense make of all the data that was collected and to categorize it into actionable things that we can pick up and run with.
You mentioned something that is obviously important, and that we try to address during the Brisbane Summit, is why aren't we collaborating? What is holding us back? Because from the article that I wrote, and many of the opinions that were being voiced, not just in the Brisbane Summit, and many other summits around the country that we've organized, even last year, is something that tends to come back. People understand that us as Africans, we quite challenge in collaborating, in patronizing each other's businesses, and helping each other, even though we actually come from a collective sort of mindset, or collective society. Why, from where you're standing with your experience as a host, why do you think that is persisting, and we're still struggling to do that? I mean, to get ourselves out of that mindset.
Um, there are a number of things. I can bring in my personal experience as well. I grew up in Zimbabwe. And in the pre-independent Zimbabwe, so I had the privilege of experience in the pre-independence and the post-independent Zimbabwe. Our education system was very to the point, particularly in Zimbabwe, very, very, but it was designed for us to be good workers. So the entrepreneurship side of things was not really part of our culture. It happened in the areas where we were restricted with the segregation. So the areas of business that we would go into as Black people that were open to for us was to open a bottle store, open a supermarket, open a shop, and then your career path, become a doctor, become all those other things. So the skilling was limited into, in terms of running businesses, whereas my counterparts, like my white friends and colleagues, some of our friends today, they had a springboard where they were starting from. So that culture, you find that, I was talking of Zimbabwe, but it applies in many other different areas, that the impacts of that colonization are still there. And Queensland African Community Council have done a research here in Queensland, which they published last month, where that research has indicated that even people in the working environment, they actually experience racism. Now, I like the metaphor that Dr. Katomi shared, which was that in terms of colonization and our mentality, we are all like in the ocean, struggling to get to swim to the shore. And that includes those who were on the oppressed side and those who were on the privileged side. We all then now need to work together to find ways that we can become more collaborative in that way. So I'll give an example. One of my passions, which I know is a passion for like QACC, Queensland African Community Council, and other African, because I'm active in the African community organizations, is that there should also be representation, equal representation, particularly in organizations that look after the interests of us as Black people. So, or just as Africans, and it broadens wider to the whole multicultural community as well. But the challenge that is there is through practice. So my mission, particularly with my organization, is to work with both white or privileged and underprivileged people to be in this together, so that if an organization says it practices and promotes the underprivileged communities, that in that organization, its representation also reflects who we are in that organization. And that way, it is through practice and through the small thing. So it's one thing desiring something, one thing, we can get together at this Afropreneur Summit, talk about, let us work together. But the key and the recipe is in the day-to-day of how do we work together.
And I suppose the question that comes after that is obviously how you get people to not only understand that sort of thing in their head, have a head knowledge of it, but integrate it into their routine and everyday sort of thing. How do you get there? Is it just because obviously we can encourage people, and when people come together, there is that energy that is created. People talk about it, but then beyond that, the mechanics of it becomes quite complicated. What would be some of the suggestions you would provide to people to help them to not only understand but really practice and devote themselves to that collaborative sort of mindset on a day-to-day basis?
Thanks, Clyde. At Pecolab, which is my organization and our colleagues, that has been our work to create small micro practices that people can access easily and actually begin to practice. And we look at 7 different categories, which we might call domains of practice. I'll just name them. Number 1, autonomy. How do you practice autonomy in your organization? From an entrepreneurship perspective, when I was running my business, I really tried to run in an egalitarian way, allow people to speak up. But because of the structure of the organizations, which is like a triangle, if somebody perceives you as the boss, just by those titles and the hierarchies in the organogram, they are going to respond to you in a different way, no matter how you try. So you actually have to change and allow people to step into their own personal leadership. So when we talk of leadership, we have a broader term which does not look at those positional leadership as well, but just anybody in their own autonomy and leadership. The second one is purpose. When we talk of communities, we can talk of multicultural community. You can talk of a team. To me, a team is a community. You can talk of an organization. It's a community. So the term community can be all sorts. But what brings a community together? It is the shared purpose. When there's a shared purpose, that shared purpose becomes the invisible leader. People are not kissing up and looking up to it's because we have that shared purpose. When we don't know what to do, we go back to that purpose. It tells us what to do instead of looking up to somebody. Then we look at meetings, the way we hold our meetings. This is all, decolonization is about power dynamics. The way you hold your meetings, where is the balance of the voice in your meetings? Are your meetings always chaired by one person? Is it the chairperson? Does it rotate around? So we have different practices. One of them, which we call co-managed meetings, where somebody can bring a topic, and they actually, that topic that they've brought into the meeting, they host it, facilitate it themselves, and the person who is managing the whole meeting, or like the host, all they're doing is just managing the flow of who comes next, and somebody manages the time, and in a way that is sort of rotating there. So it's sharing responsibility and accountability. Then the next one, number 3, is the big thing, transparency. Our organizations have too much secrecy, such that the people at the front, sometimes they don't have the information that they need. So defaulting to transparent is always a better way to run your organizations. And the next big one is decision making. How do you make decisions? Decide how you are going to make decisions. And there are many ways. You've got the autocratic, where one person decides, and then you have the painful consensus decision making, where everybody has to say yes. There's a time and place for everything, but there's one that is not so known by people, which is called generative decision making, which is designed out of Pecolab. So we train people in how to use that as well. So it's a consent-based decision making, and it's based on the Agile principles. If it's good enough for now and safe enough to try, you move on. You get organizations that spend 2 weeks trying to make a decision, and then they want that decision implemented in a day. So rather spend more time in the implementation in a shorter period, review, see how it is, and go back and picking that up. And then the last 2, that's the learning and development. The whole learning. I'm a Christian, and one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 12, verse 2, which is be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So decolonization starts in our head, and we can then bring it into our organizations. And learning needs to be self-directed and collectively held. So we are holding each other, we are supporting each other. And in all your meetings, maybe you set aside 10 minutes to learning and development and work on some practices that you help each other to develop. And that requires creating a psychological safe space. And also, even the leader sets the pace. If I, as the leader or the founder of the organization, if I make a mistake and I admit to my people, if I use my people term, that, oh, you were right, I was wrong, and I made this mistake. That demonstrates vulnerability. And we have a number of practices that help to bring in that vulnerability. One of the things, I'll give one example. Listening is, as much as we all value that it's important, it is a challenge to many of us. And at Pecolab, based on these domains, we have designed a game called Listen For, which is, I've got it here. It's a game that you play playfully, and you have a listener and a storyteller, and the story. So there are cards that prompt the storyteller to tell a story based linked to one of those domains, and the listener also has a lens that is given to listen based on that as well. We offer this just as an offer to the community for free. We run every second month a free session. I could share, maybe you can share in the notes, the next one, which is on the 3rd of December, and it's free. People can come on to that. Then,
all right.
Lastly, relationships and conflicts. That's the other bit to complete the whole set of 7. How we work with them.
Yes, relationships and conflict, because I suppose everything, whenever you put two people together, two or more people together, relationship comes into it. You need to know how to manage it. Conflict naturally arises when sometimes it could be just something like having different opinions about something, and then in other settings it could be more than that. But how do you manage all of that? It's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of time for now, but we're very happy that at least you've been able to highlight those 7 things that you recommend that people do to encourage them to become a bit more to develop that collaborative mindset. I will try to organize another opportunity in the future where we may be able perhaps to dive a little more into those things, because I believe our future as African people lies in us being more open to collaboration, because we, especially in the diaspora settings where we are a minority, and we see other communities who tend to collaborate more than we do. I mean, there are always issues in every community, but no community is perfect. But there's a lot of room for us to improve in terms of how we collaborate, and that's something we continue to push for within the Afropreneur Summit settings, in the business settings, as well as in other social entrepreneurship settings. But for now, Nick Takavadi, maybe I'll leave you. I'll give you 1 minute to finish before. I mean, to say your final word before.
Sure. I'm looking at you. I'm seeing the books behind you there, and one of the way that we really is like reading up. But we're all different. Some of us like to listen. Some like to read. I have a book recommendation for those that really want to dig up and read this. It's a book called Going Horizontal by Samantha Slade. It's available on Audible and on online.
Going horizontal. That is very good. I promise I will trying to get that book and read it or listen to it. I like reading. I still like the feel of the paper, even though these days everything is digital. Nick, thank you very much. I'm kind of left a little hungry, but it's just because of limited time we have today. We will certainly try to organize another opportunity to talk more about this. We appreciate you helping us through the Afropreneur Summit, and we know that there's a lot more where that came from, and I know that people who may want to know more about this should contact you. We have your details, so if people are interested, please contact us. We'll connect you to Nick for more conversations. Until next time, Nick.
I'm on LinkedIn as well.
You're on LinkedIn, that's
Nick
right.
Takavadi, yeah.
That's Nick Takavadi on LinkedIn.
And I just want to say, Claude, I really appreciate your courage and your initiative in connecting our community here and your drive and passion for bringing entrepreneurship so that we move from being good workers to also being players in uplifting ourselves, both economically and in contribution to this country, the way we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. Until next time, guys, stay connected, and there's more coming your way from us. Have a good evening in Queensland, Nick. Thank you.
Cheers, bro.
Okay. I'll talk to you later, Nick. I got to run to this other meeting.
All right, brother. Thanks. Cheers.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right.